for all those Man City fans who said there was an asterisk next to our title in the COVID one, well, they've got several next to all their trophies now.
They should have their titles stripped. This wasn't a fair fight.
It doesn't feel like you're competing on a level playing field. Obviously, we've all known about these investigations for a while, and when it went into its fourth year or whatever it was, you start to wonder whether anything's ever going to happen. I think a lot of fans have had the suspicions when you see certain things come out around, Liverpool's wage bill being higher, City's commercial revenue being higher, and stuff like that. And it is a bit of, always a few raised eyebrows. And it seems that the Premier League have got some raised eyebrows as well. So wait and see. It's just a funny one, really, because you think, well, what can it change? In the past, really, what's done is done in a lot of ways, and also, what difference is it going to make in the future? I guess it depends on how strict these regulations are. But we've seen Juventus over in Italy, a few times really had some really severe punishments in terms of leagues taken off them, and also obviously big points deduction this season. So, it is possible if club. It depends how forceful clubs want to be, and of course how good Manchester City's lawyers are, which we all need to be sort of careful of, I suppose, when talking about these things.
I mean, this investigation has been going on for years. I don't think the Premier League would have pursued this for, I think it's 4 years now that they've maintained this investigation. I don't think they'd have kept it going for this long if they didn't believe they had sufficient evidence to back the investigation in the first place, and a degree of confidence that they'd come out with allegations sort of at the end of it. So, I'll be very interested to see what the process is sort of beyond this. As you say, it's going to go to an independent sort of commission that's going to analyse this in more detail. But I think what's going to be most interesting for me personally is what kind of, well, firstly, if the allegations are found to be completely accurate, for one, and secondly, if so that is the case, what are the kind of sanctions that we look to implement here? We've seen plenty of talk on Twitter, fans going, Liverpool are going to get their 3-4 titles, but I personally, obviously, I'm a Liverpool fan. I'd love to see some more titles added, in whatever form, but I personally can't see that happening. I think, as we've sort of discussed prior to this, I think a points deduction is probably going to be the most likely outcome if a breach has been found.
What would you want in terms of a football fan, not even just a Liverpool fan, if they were found guilty? I know it's hard for us to say categorically whether they are or they aren't, because we're not accountants, we're not there. But what would you want as a football fan from your perspective?
As a football fan, completely neutral of my own club allegiances, I'd say the same if it was Newcastle or Chelsea. I think an example has to be made. I don't think it's necessary to completely expel City from the league, but I think a clear example has to be made. We can't have another slap on the wrist, because ultimately you want to say from here, right, going forward, everyone needs to be completely transparent, but with their finances. We can't have a situation where other clubs look at whatever sanction is applied to City and go, you know what, we could risk the same thing. We'll get off lightly. Okay, maybe we'll have a points deduction, and maybe that will affect one season. But given the amount of money we've spent on our squads, it doesn't really matter in the long run. I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of making an example that other clubs look at and go, actually, we don't want to take that risk. So as I say, it'd be interesting what form the punishment takes. But I think at this point in time, I think at the very least, I'd want to see a serious points deduction, something beyond the 10 mark. Because it's honestly at this point, it's not just about simply punishing City. You've got to send a message to the other clubs. You've got to send a message that financial transparency is absolutely critical.
What's frustrating at the moment is that one of the things that's being thrown at Jurgen Klopp and this Liverpool side in particular is that they haven't won more. So, we've had this period where we've seen, the best team in my lifetime, and a lot of older Liverpool fans say the best team they've ever seen as well. But, the easiest thing for other fans to throw back is, yeah, but you've only won one league title. And the fact is that they should have won much more, and they would have done, if they weren't competing against this Manchester City team who have got so many more benefits behind them. And then it looks, from this report that, there's been, some financial irregularities sort of thrown in there as well. So it doesn't feel like you're competing on a level playing field. And I understand that the traditional bigger clubs do have their, you know, benefits as well, and you know, the global fan bases and what that allows you to do, and I sort of accept that really. But you feel like, you know, it has been skewed so far the other way that, you know, you're almost sort of, you know, fighting with one hand behind your back really. So it is frustrating. You know, it's been frustrating anyway, you know, not to see the bus side getting 90 odd points and only coming second. You know, sometimes, you know, to 1 point or a late goal or sort of whatever it is. And so to know that, you know, some of those titles may have been achieved through sort of, you know, practices that aren't right and that are sort of against set rules, you know, does leave, you know, a bit of a sour taste. So we'll see. You know, there's a long way to go, isn't there? You know, this stuff's come out, but I think it'll be, you know, if it's going to an independent commission and then maybe even appeals, I think it's going to be sort of years before we know sort of what the follow up will be. But, you know, for all those Man City fans who said there was an asterisk next to our title in the COVID one, well, they've got several next to all their trophies now.
It's a difficult one to answer. I think it's something that potentially needs to be considered. The difficulty here is how far back do you go? Do you look back on, say, the last 5 years? Do you go literally, okay, from the point at which City had new owners? Do you go back that far? Because there's talk about not just the 18, 19s and sort of then on sort of seasons. You know, would Liverpool's 13, 14 near miss also be up for grabs? So I suppose they need to decide how far back they're going to take this. I think if we're the other way round, I think City fans would be saying, oh, come on, there has to be some serious questions here about the validity of those titles. So I think it's something that should definitely be considered. Again, it's up to the extent to which the sanctions are going to be taken.
I mean, I suppose if they do date back to 2009, City's owners took over in 2008, you'd have to say that the whole foundation of the club, whether it's run in the correct way now, if they are found guilty, that has been built on financial mismanagement and lies and cheating, basically.
It certainly absolutely had an impact there. I think you can't ignore the link between, you know, the results on the pitch. You know, as deserved as it's been from a purely sporting perspective, from the management, the quality of the players you've had, you can't, especially nowadays, you just can't separate sporting achievement with the finances sort of behind the scenes. That has to be taken into consideration. As I've mentioned earlier, you know, it's not just about swatting down a team that's been highly successful in recent years. It shouldn't be about that. Anyone motivated purely by that reason shouldn't be. We should be looking at the bigger picture here. The bigger picture here is we want to send a message not just to City. You want to send a message to the league as a whole. You know, be that, you know, you obviously look at the change of ownership we've seen at Chelsea and Newcastle, Liverpool, Manchester United have been linked with owners from, you know, connected with connections to Middle Eastern sort of regimes. It's about sending a message to those currently in the league and those teams who could look to be owned by these kind of entities in future, that sporting achievement has to be fair. It has to be fair. You're allowed to invest in your team within the realms of what's, you know, currently allowed. We run it. I appreciate we run into difficult territory here, as I say, when we think, you know, let's strip all their titles, anything that was directly linked to the advantage gained by the manipulation of the rules. I can completely understand why fans, not just Liverpool fans, but also neutrals, are saying, well, you know, they should have their titles stripped. This wasn't a fair fight. I can completely understand that argument. I guess for me, the difficulty is where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? If the Premier League do decide this, if the Independent Commission do decide, I think the sanctions they can choose to apply are quite broad. It could be anything from a points deduction to, as you say, sort of expulsion from the top flight, to, I believe there's an added condition where, you know, whatever they deem is sort of the fair punishment in that situation. What that would look like, I can't rightly say. I don't think they should necessarily remove the possibility of taking away their titles from the table, but I don't think that should be the instant sort of response taken.